everybody. Welcome to the county seat. I'm your host, Chad Booth. We are pleased today to be able to have our premier one-on-one conversation with newly elected U.S. Congressman Ben McAdams for the 4th District here in Utah. Thank you for taking the time to visit with us today. Appreciate having you back on the county seat. Set is, kind of a big cheese now.
Well, thank you, Chad. It's great to be back. Last time I was here, I was a county official, and now I'm in the United States Congress. It's great to be back on.
There's a history to you and your political career that is kind of a bounce back and forth. And just before we started the program, we were kind of talking about this. So the first time I remember you were working as like an AA for Ralph Becker.
City government, yeah.
City government. And then you jumped to the Senate, Utah State Senate. And so then back to county mayor. Now you're legislative again. Which one's more comfortable for you?
Well, I have to say mayor and county government is the one that's most comfortable. We'll see what happens in Congress, but I really loved local government, and just the opportunity to be on the ground serving the people was so great. And in county government, we don't think in the terms of Republican or Democrat. We just think in terms of what do our people need, what can we do to move forward, and how do we come together. So I'm hoping to actually keep that perspective, even though I will be in Washington and working in Congress, to never lose sight of that local government perspective, because I think that, I think a lot of what we do in local government could fix a lot of what's wrong in Washington.
How different is the job? I mean, the mayor has a different set of functions, but people think, well, I elect one, I elect the other, they're all the same. How has the job been different so far?
Well, I think, disappointingly in Washington, I've only been there a month, but disappointingly, I think it's much more partisan on both sides. And people just are remembering that when the Republicans were in charge or the Democrats were in charge, they did this, and so we're going to do this. And, we just don't think that way in local government. We may disagree on a particular issue, but then 10 minutes later, we're working together on the next issue, because you just don't have the luxury to have partisan disagreements and to have a long memory in local government. So I'm hoping to, I never want to lose that perspective of, the work that we're doing and the problems we're trying to solve are much bigger than the next election or the last election or any partisan divide. So far what I've seen is it's much more partisan on both sides, but I swear that I'm not gonna let Washington change me, and hopefully we can get more people there and we can actually change Washington.
Usually it takes 6 months for a freshman legislator congressman to report back home on, I got this done.
Yeah.
You've hit the ground running. And strangely enough, it wasn't for Salt Lake County. It was a rural issue.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some of the money you got for fire damage.
Yeah. So when I was campaigning, as mayor, I represented Salt Lake County, but as a candidate, went down to into Utah County and then San Pete and Juab County to meet people down there and try and understand the issues. And it was just after the fires down there, and seeing how that had come so close to, really done a lot of damage in the communities, but had come close to ravaging communities, even worse than it did. And so there were some appropriations moving through Congress that had actually come through. I have to give credit to Congressman Stewart, who really led out on this, but some appropriations for environmental mitigation and to mitigate some of the impacts of these fires in San Pete County. And so it was my pleasure to roll up my sleeves and work on that and make sure we got that appropriation across the finish line. I wanted my colleagues to understand what a deep impact these fires had on our community. And not only these specific fires, but the fire risk and honestly, to some extent, mismanagement and underinvestment in our BLM and our federal lands that put these communities at risk. And so it's it's the least we can do is to mitigate some of the impacts of the most recent fires. But we really need to do more to think ahead in the long term about avoiding fires or mitigating risks of fires into the future.
Do you see that putting logging back into part of the management mix a little bit more than we've done in some kind of selective fashion? Because you've got a reputation of being pretty friendly to the Sierra Club, and that's not always been an agenda item for them, but it seems like it makes practical sense. What's your take on that?
Yeah, and I hope my reputation is one of a pragmatist at the end of the day. I think all of us in Utah, I grew up as a Boy Scout hiking and biking and camping in some of these beautiful lands, and we have beautiful lands here, and we're lucky to have them. And I think we all want to protect them and preserve them for future generations, and that's part of who I am. But one thing that I've learned both as mayor and I'm seeing in Washington is that solutions are never black and white. And you've got to be able to really get your hands dirty, get into the details of solutions to find the right answer. And you can't, if you just side up with one side or the other, you're missing all of the details in between. So, logging's a great example of, in some places, that probably is the right answer. In other places, there's going to be different answers. But you look at some of the impacts of the bark beetle and some of the forest, decay that we have in some of our forests. And we've got to really do something about this. And it's going to take effort. It's going to take time and active management to protect these forests from future damages and to protect our community from some of the damages that will come from the next fire, and there will be a next fire.
As a member of the Democratic Party, usually it's government is the source and solution to most of the problems, and we've just been talking about a free enterprise interface with government and government regulations. Can those coexist?
I'm a centrist in the Democratic Party, so I got back to Congress, and one of the first groups that I aligned myself with was the Blue Dog Coalition. These are 27 Democrats who, are pro-business and pro-states' rights, or local. Really believe that local solutions that come from states and local government are some of the best solutions, and the federal government in many cases needs to step out of the way. And I've said, when you get back there and you see some of the people who were elected in this last election, and some of them get a lot of great headlines and they're driving some of the narrative. So if you judged based on the headlines, you get one perception of the Democratic Party. So I've been telling people, if you think there are only two political parties in this country, watch Congress over the next several years, because you're going to see, very conservative Republicans, and it depends on the issue. Some people may be conservative on one issue and liberal on another, or centrist on another, and you see that not only with Republicans but with Democrats. So I've always said, I'm going to be the person who I'm never going to ask, what does the party think about this issue? I'm going to ask, is it good for my district? Is it good for people in my district? And does it align with my values as an individual and what I think is good for the people of Utah and good for this country? And if that puts me siding with the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, I don't care.
Okay. Well, we're going to take a quick break. We'll come back, continue our conversation with Congressman Ben McAdams. We'll be right back.
There's a little place on a Utah map where I was raised, where my heart's at, where the sagebrush grows wild and high, and the stars come out at night. Oh, there ain't nothing like being raised in the basin with a Ute reservation, skiing starvation, that Duchesne County life.
What would you do with an extra day in Utah Valley? Explore the Wasatch Mountains? Snap a family photo at Bridal Veil Falls. Cool off on Utah Lake or the Provo River. No matter what you're searching for, you can find it in Utah Valley. Bring everyone together.
Beautiful scene, isn't it? The great wide spaces of the wild, wild West. Hi, I'm Chad Booth, host of At Your Leisure. I'm asking you to support the Blue Ribbon Coalition. Their efforts responsibly preserve access to our public lands. If it were not for the Blue Ribbon Coalition and their efforts, you may not have access to millions of acres of land across the West. This is America's playground, and if we don't do anything, we are going to lose it. Join, participate, and donate.
All local products have a story of magical places, real people, and delicious recipes spanning generations. So go ahead and discover flavors you've never tasted and friends you never knew you had. Utah's own Discover Local Food.
Welcome back to the county seat. We're having a one-on-one conversation with Congressman Ben McAdams. Good to have you back in the studio, Congressman.
Thank you, Chad.
I want to kind of divert here for a minute while we're talking about bipartisanship. Man, for the first month with a government shutdown, it had to be that had to be, I guess, what I would call a cantankerous welcome to Congress. Tell me about the shutdown and how you got past it, or how they got past it, and how much of a fix it really is.
Well, so when I was sworn into office on January 3rd, we were, I think, 13 days into the government shutdown already. And you have to say it was really frustrating. You know, again, coming from local government where we just get stuff done, you'd never imagine a county government shutting down because of a disagreement, right? I mean, we'll have disagreements, and we'll you know, talk with each other and sometimes even argue. It's always constructive argument, but then we make our decisions and get the job done. So to come into a government that is so dysfunctional, that is actually shut down and not even performing its core functions. This is the greatest country on earth, and our government is shut down because our political leaders from both sides can't find agreement. That was really disappointing to me. Fortunately, now we've opened the government. It was a temporary fix, you know, with open for 3 weeks so we can debate some of these other issues and hopefully find common ground to keep it open. But I think it was, you know, epitomized the sad state of where we are as a country with disagreement and dysfunction. And I hope it was a low and that we can start climbing out from that. But at this point, I can't say.
Have you had any interface with the people that are working, members of Congress who are working as a team to try and get this solved?
Yeah, a little bit. There's a bipartisan committee that's working to try and hammer out the details and find common ground, and I've had a little bit of interface with them. You know, my call, both publicly and in private conversations with these individuals, has been first and foremost, nothing good came out of the last shutdown. There's never a good reason to shut down the government. We've got to find common ground. And then also I think there's actually good arguments on both sides. I know as mayor, you know, especially with some of the work that I did on homelessness, I see the harm that comes to a community from illegal drugs that come into this country, and illegal drugs and human trafficking. All of those things hit Main Street America, and we've got to do a better job of protecting our borders. At the same time, we've also got to reform a broken immigration system. Let's make it so that good people who this country wants to come here, so they can come here legally without coming across the border illegally. So fix a broken immigration system, but then don't ignore the challenges of border security. We've got to address that too.
Would you may never answer another question for me again, but I'm going to ask this one. Had you been in leadership's position, would you have been a little more compromising with where the president is trying to go with physical border security?
I would have, and I've said as much in numerous press interviews. You know, I think what, you know, the debates about, are we building a wall or are we not building a wall? What I would have done if I was mayor of Salt Lake County and we were having this discussion is say, okay, there is not agreement on building a wall or not building a wall. Take a step back. What are we really trying to accomplish? We're trying to secure the border from illegal drugs, illegal immigration, illegal other trafficking of human trafficking, guns and whatnot. That's what we're trying to accomplish. I think everybody agrees that we want to reduce those things. Then what's the solutions to reduce those things? Well, immigration reform is important, and it'll help us to stop illegal immigration, to have a pathway for legal immigration. Let's talk about technology to screen, whether it's dogs or other types of technological scanners to scan for guns or drugs or human trafficking across the border. Honestly, we probably do need some barriers in some places. I don't think we need 2,000 miles of a wall, but we're going to need barriers call it a wall or call it whatever. You're going to need barriers in the right places to secure those things. I think if we took a step back from a debate about a wall or no wall and instead talked about border security and keeping this country safe, I think we could find agreement. But I think both sides, the president and Democratic leadership, have kind of dug in and drawn lines in the sand for which there's no compromise. And I think we do need to try and understand each other. The president is raising some valid points that I think we can recognize are valid, and then we can find common ground.
Excellent. Let's take a quick break. We'll come back to continue our conversation with Congressman Ben McAdams. We'll be right back.
Years in the making, dinosaurs once roamed this land. Now they're found at the Dinosaur National Monument. Let's take you beyond the bones. We call it Dinosaur Land. You'll find it offers adventures and sights not seen anywhere else in the world. Come to Dinosaur Land, Vernal, Utah. You'll want to stay forever. The dinosaurs did.
There are meetings, and then there are gatherings. At the Davis Conference Center, we know the difference. Turn your event into something more than just another business summit. With over 70,000 square feet of flexible meeting space, state-of-the-art presentation amenities, and inspiring architecture, the Davis Conference Center is designed to deliver stellar results in a majestic setting. Take your convention to the next level. Schedule now at davisconferencecenter.com.
Welcome back to the county seat. We're having a conversation with Congressman Ben McAdams, and you know, you left a lot on the plate when you stepped aside as mayor midterm to go back and take your congressional seat. So, what issues have you taken forward with you?
You know, I was happy that I leave Salt Lake County in good shape, that there's, you know, there really aren't any fires burning, things are going well, there's still work to be done, as there will always be, but the county's in good shape. One of the things that I hope to take with me from my service at the county level and to take it into Washington, well, a couple of things. First of all is just that perspective that what America needs is problem solvers, not partisans. People who are willing to listen, to reach across the aisle and find solutions, and really throw this party ideology in the trash and just do what's good for the country. That's what we did at county government. I think we need more of that at the federal level. The other thing that I think I'd like to bring is just this real world perspective. I think too often it seems like people go to Washington and they get caught up in their Washington parties and Washington way of thinking and that, and they forget what things are like, you know, in everyday America. And so whether it's, you know, my work on homelessness and really standing shoulder to shoulder with people who are homeless services providers, with law enforcement, with drug enforcement agents, with the homeless, and helping to understand the situation from, you know, on the ground level and then reflecting that back into federal policy.
So how can a federal program, without taking autonomy away from a local government, actually function? How do you do that?
Well, and you know, I've seen some of the places where federal guidelines, in some places federal guidelines are important. We want to have standards. We don't, there's potential for abuses and you want to guarantee against that. But also allow enough latitude for local government to innovate. You know, I saw places where we were hamstrung by federal guidelines that we knew what was right and what we needed to do to fix the situation, but we couldn't because of outdated federal guidelines. And so I think it's always important as a member of Congress to stay in touch with local, you know, with the real realities of the problem. So, for example, when the government was shut down, I declined to collect a paycheck. I thought it was important to put myself. Now, I'm not in the same position financially. I'm not rich, but I'm not in the same position financially as a TSA worker who's living paycheck to paycheck. But I felt at the very least I could put myself in as similar a situation as possible to understand them and reflect that in the decisions I make in Congress. So, you know, it's the same thing, I think, whether it's homelessness or traffic and transportation solutions that we're working on, is to stay in touch with the people who are experiencing the policies that we pass in Congress, whether it's the mayors trying to fix a road or the homeless service provider trying to help somebody get over an addiction and get a job, to stay in touch and to always be back in Utah, listening to them, standing shoulder to shoulder with them, and to remember that I work for them. Not that I have all knowledge in Washington, but I work for them, and I want to take their challenges and try and reflect solutions into federal law, but leaves enough latitude for them to continue to innovate and problem solve.
So 30 years ago, the way to solve that from a federal level was to do block grants.
Mm-hmm.
Just say, okay, we're not going to tell you how to run the program, we're going to set the goals, and here's money. We were trying to do that with Medicaid expansion. Governor Herbert trying to bring the Healthy Utah initiative. Do you support that? Do you support that mentality?
Yeah. So as mayor, we had what was called a community development block grant and a social security block grant, and those worked great. You know, I see some communities they don't work well. What we did at Salt Lake County is we said, you know, there's all these different cities that are getting block grants, and they're getting, you know, small dollar amounts that weren't doing a lot. So what we did in Salt Lake County is we pulled together all of these cities and said, let's work together to use our block grants together to do bigger things and have a bigger impact. And at a local level, we knew what our problems were. And so I think if the federal government had told us how to spend these dollars, they wouldn't have been used as wisely as we as mayors knew how to use them on the ground here in Utah. So I think it's a good approach. I think you want to kind of balance, broad vision from the federal level, but specific implementation coming from the local level, so people can make on-the-ground decisions and adaptations that are right for their community. But you want to, at the federal level, avoid a potential for abuses or misuse of those funds.
So if you were to translate that over into public lands, and you knew I'd make this jump somewhere during the half hour, do you envision the same sort of thing where we set the federal guidelines for forest management, but we may actually consider and pass legislation saying, this is what we expect at the end, and let the state run with it to see if they can't make their forests healthier?
Yeah, so like the same thing with home, and I've had this exact conversation with many of my colleagues on the county commission. Now, in Salt Lake County was an opioid crisis and homelessness, and in Garfield County it's public lands issues. But while the underlying issue may be different, a lot of the frustrations were the same, and some of the solutions were the same. So, again, just like with homelessness, I think at the federal level we may set out broad goals and guidelines. We want to make sure that there aren't abuses and that there's certain national goals, because you're having national dollars flow into this. National goals are set, but then a local level guideline and implementation. You want to make sure that you build consensus from the individual to the mayor to the county commissioner, all the way up to the congressman representing that district, so that there's a broad array of buy-in and consensus building. And so I think absolutely with public lands, I didn't deal with public lands in the same nature that a lot of our more rural counties did. But in Salt Lake County, we did. Yeah. We have the Wasatch, right? And so we were looking at, the Wasatch provides the drinking water for half a million people. But it's also the ski resorts, which provide a significant part of our Salt Lake County economy. So we want to balance, a thriving ski industry, protecting our watershed, protecting these backcountry, these natural areas that are a big part of our tourism industry, and then people who live in the canyons, and balance all of those things together. So what we did is we brought together cities, public, environmental groups, ski resorts, counties, the state. All of those people came around. We sat around the table, we rolled out maps, and we spent a couple of years hammering it out, looking at it. And if we had had a solution that came from the federal government, it would have missed the mark. But we were able to make little adaptations. Like we said, if this line can shift, 15 feet here, we can put in a trail, the Bonneville Shoreline Trail, that'll serve so many people in the valley. So it's even the matter of a 15-degree shift in a line that happens because you're involved at the local level to make these policies matter. And so I think that's how public lands really, the solution needs to be, a conversation. The feds need to engage the local government and the public to really identify that, do that consensus building, and find the solution that works for everybody. It takes a lot of communication, a lot of time, and willingness to talk.
Well, it leads me to another question, but I've got to take a break. When we come back, I'll hit you with one more.
All right.
All right, stay with us. We'll be right back.
In a place that is beyond words, there is nothing to be said, except take your time in Bryce Canyon country.
My daughter and I had just finished a run at this place called Eagle Point. It's this really cool but kind of challenging ski resort that has a real family feel to it. She was so excited because she beat me down the run. Deja vu. I saw myself as a kid out skiing my mom. It was a big moment for me. And all of a sudden it hit me. I was making the same memories for her.
Beaver County, Utah. Make it more than a vacation.
Utah has a national treasure where winding canyons stretch to the horizon, where nature forms elegant structures, and where iconic monuments of the West stand tall. Visitors around the world come to get a glimpse of southern Utah's legendary landscape and landmarks. Join them and explore San Juan County, Utah's Canyon Country.
Welcome back to the county seat, a conversation with Congressman Ben McAdams. You made a promise when you were elected that you were not going to go status quo with leadership in the House. How did that turn out?
Well, I kept that promise. You know, I said it during the campaign, and I said even after I was elected, that I think it's time for new leadership in Washington from both parties. And for me, that meant that I wasn't going to vote for Nancy Pelosi for Speaker of the House. A lot of Democrats thought that was the wrong decision. They wanted me to vote for, but my conscience said, and I think that my district said, it's time for new leadership. She's been the Democratic leader for 14 years. You know, a new face and somebody who maybe is more of a bridge builder, consensus builder would be good to lead out this new Congress with the Democrats in the majority. So I voted. Unfortunately, nobody else ended up running, but I felt that it was important enough to stay with my conscience and to keep the promise I made during the campaign. So I voted for Representative Stephanie Murphy, who's the leader of the Blue Dog Coalition in Congress, who I think is a symbol of someone who would make a great leader.
That was my other question. Okay, so who was it you did vote for?
Yeah.
But okay.
So I voted for Stephanie Murphy, and you know, for me, it was she wasn't going to have the votes to win, but I think it was important to send the signal that I'm not going to fall in line. I'm going to vote my conscience, and I'm going to stand for the people in my district and what they want. And sometimes I'll get some heat for that. I did in this case, but I'm going to do what I think is right.
Are you getting skunk eye from leadership because of it?
I think a little bit, but you know what I said is if they want to punish me for it, then they deserved the no vote. There will be times that I will vote with the Democrats. There are times that I will not vote with the Democrats, and they just take me for who I am. This is who the district elected, and that's where my loyalties are. My loyalties are with Utah before anybody else.
Well, in a year's time, I'm going to hold you to that statement.
Okay.
We'll see how it goes.
Let's do it.
Thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Thank you, Chad.
And thank you for joining us on the county seat. Remember, local government is where your life happens. Be involved, be engaged, be part of the solution. Check us out on social media. Share this conversation with your friends, and we'll see you next week on the county seat.